Hi everyone, welcome to this Knowledge Exchange UK webinar, this time hosted with Digital Science. I'm Luke Norman, Head of Professional Development, and I'm delighted to be joined by Shane Jackson, who is the Product Specialist from Digital Science. Hi Shane.
Hello, thank you, Luke.
And today the webinar is all about from insight to income, accelerating commercialization with Dimensions Industry Partnerships. And this webinar is all about how you can work better with the private sector. What are the challenges around working with the private sector? What companies are interested in your university's research? What programs are of interest to specific partners? Do you have a full view of existing partnerships as well? Well, this webinar will give you an introduction to the app and show you how it can answer pressing questions facing tech transfer and research officers using digital science. So I'm delighted to hand over to Shane, who will talk to you all about this app. Thank you, Shane.
Okay, thank you, Luke. Right, so I will just get my screen up. So just so that everyone knows, the way it's going to work is I'm going to run through a few slides just to introduce you to the product we're looking at and how it works and some of the use cases it can be applied to along the lines of what Luke just described. And then I'll do a bit of live demoing so you can see the tool in action. Um, Before that, though, just a brief introduction to myself. So as Luke said, I'm a product specialist at Digital Science. Digital Science is a research software company that makes tools that operate across the research life cycle. In particular, with today in mind, we have a tool called Dimensions, which is the world's largest linked research database. And on top of that, we've built a tool called Dimensions Industry Partnerships, which is very catered towards the kind of use cases that a tech transfer or knowledge exchange office, whatever your university calls your team, um, it's catered towards those kind of use cases. A bit about my background though. So I actually used to work in a or across a I think it was called an innovation office at the University of Exeter in the UK. I was a data analyst shared between there and the research office. So I was often asked the kind of questions that the app has been designed to answer. So, this would have been a tool I would have loved to have if it had been released a few years ago. Alas, it came too late for me. But hopefully I can use my experience of some of the use cases I used to get asked about to show you how the app can handle them. Um, so yeah, so just to go into a bit more detail about some of the things we'll cover, how you can identify new opportunities potentially, analyze existing partnerships, and then understand the wider collaborative landscape uh, between the university sector and private industry. Um, and this will include things like being able to identify new opportunities, um, analyze and understand your existing collaborations in more detail than you might already have, and then also potentially understand who your either potential collaborators or competitors, depending on how you view them, might be in this kind of space. So problems that I or universities may experience or have experienced. So a common thing that I found was that you might have a good understanding of research contracts, but not much else that was going on. So it would obviously end up in the finance system or a grants management system if the university had worked with a particular company. But you might not know about anything before that point. Um, or even if there were initial conversations happening in a CRM system, there was no information about individual researchers perhaps who may not be using a tool like that, who they'd worked with, or just a place where you could find out who was looking up the university, for lack of a better term, who was browsing your website, who was using your university's research already in their own activity. And that kind of leads on to the next bullet point about being able to identify a tangible outcome, but it being difficult to identify initial interest. Um, and this can have influences on how the university would market itself to industry, but also where it would target resource to try and initiate conversations, what kind of conferences you may send people to. what kind of areas you might focus investment on within the university for promoting this kind of activity, like maybe use of HIVE funds or that kind of thing. Um, Also, even if you can do that, and I don't want to rule out that all universities or some universities couldn't do that kind of thing of tracking their own engagement or who is interested, it might be difficult to then understand who, which other universities and institution was interested in or looking up. And so Dimensions Industry Partnerships also answers that use case. You'll see the app is built on the premise that you look up an institution. Primarily, we expect people to look up their own institution, but there is functionality in there to benchmark or even just snoop on anyone else you want to keep track of. Building beyond that, it might also be difficult to expand an existing relationship into other areas. Again, I can think of a particular example where this happened at the university I used to work at, where we established a relationship with a company in one very particular area, but then it was kind of, we weren't sure if there were other people at the company who might be interested in working with other researchers at the university. And Dimensions Industry Partnerships is really useful for giving you that fuller picture of where those areas of interest overlap, both based on the kind of portfolio of research that both the institution and the company do or conduct, but also where there may already be relationships happening more informally, shall we say. And then lastly, even if you have a CRM system or a grant management system or just typing the data up into spreadsheets, it might not be easily aggregatable, if that's a term, if you need to report on it, either internally or externally. And therefore, from that, it can be difficult to kind of build a narrative or get a high-level overview of what's happening or understand the direction of travel. So Dimension Industry Partnerships is very much built to aggregate data to the kind of levels that might be useful for that kind of activity, rather than just kind of being like underlying line by line items, although you will have access to that information via the tool if you need to understand at that level of detail. So as I've alluded to, DIP, Dimensions Industry Partnerships, can help with all of these areas. So it can track co-authorship on publications, but also it can track citations of work. So we can tell which papers or publications a university has produced, which have been cited by industry, but we can also highlight where we also can't find any pre-existing relationships. And I should say co-authorship there, not co-authorship shop. There's always one typo. It's also, as I've alluded to, it's possible to look at any research organization or a company you may be interested in working with. DIP can categorize a research company's research publications into discipline areas, and beyond that, low-level concepts to highlight the areas of interest they most frequently work in. And it can also do the same for your institution or another institution, so you can get a sense of where those areas of overlap are. And the app is also has built-in filtering, tables, and visualizations predefined, so that you can make it easy to narrow down to particular areas of interest that you want to focus on. So we've talked a lot about what the tool does, but to preempt questions you may have, I also need to talk a bit about the underlying database, which I mentioned at the beginning, Dimensions, which is where all this data is ultimately being drawn from. So as I touched on, it's a full research lifecycle database. And by that, I mean, it's not just showing you publications. It includes information on grants, patents, clinical trials, and that information is all pulled in various places to help you explore multiple different use cases that might go beyond just what you're interested in a tech transfer office, and also the underlying Dimensions web application, although it's not the focus of this talk, does have functionality that may be of interest to your offices more broadly beyond the core use cases covered by DIP. So a key thing to note is that we have full text access for about 75% of our publications. And that means that we aren't relying just on the title and abstract, and this really helps with our classification of documents. So we think that makes our classification more reliable and more trustworthy in terms of which discipline areas it's touching on. A lot of other tools will rely on journal level mapping. We do all this activity at article level. Um, so we can be much more specific about the kind of categorizations we use than something that relies on a journal level categorization could be. And then beyond that, we can also link and enrich our data. And as I've touched on, that includes discipline classification, but it can also include researcher disambiguation. So a function of the app is to be able to show you who individual researchers work with, so you can understand which individuals are being cited by a particular company or your own researchers' networks, rather than having to rely on them reporting it up to you. And we can also categorize organizations by type, and that's a fundamental underpinning of the Dimensions Industry Partnership app. We can instantly filter to private sector actors, so you don't even have to go through the issue that I know I used to have of trying to work out from a bibliometric database, what's an academic institution, what's a government body, what's a healthcare organization, etc. Just to build on this linking activity, so you can see here the scope of what's in Dimensions. This is from a few weeks ago, so the numbers will have ticked up slightly in the intervening period. But you can see we have over 160 million publications, best part more than 70 million data sets, the best part of 200 million patents. And another function of Dimensions History Partnerships is to show patent citations as well. And then you can also see here across all these types of activity, we have billions of links, melding that all together. And that's a core part of showing you the co-authorship and the citation networks that the app is built upon. And again, showing you here just that full life cycle of activity. And so access for the users who would have the Dimension Industry Partnerships would have access to the underlying core Dimensions web application, where you could, as I touched on before, use some of these other data types and other core functionality of the web app to build on other use cases. But I think that would very much be a topic for another call, too much to cover in detail here, but just to make you aware that all this data and functionality is there. Then lastly, just building a bit more on the enrichments. So I've kind of touched on here things like researcher disambiguation, concept extraction, and categorization. Another thing that I touched on less was that from the affiliations authors or investigators on grants, for example, claim, we can then build a picture of which organization they are claiming affiliation with, whether that be with an academic institution or also a company or other kind of organization. So, having introduced you to the data and kind of how the tool works, I'm now going to start to run through a few examples and just to lay out what those will be. So this is to look at, see which companies are citing an institution's research, review existing collaborations, so profiling a company, so looking at who else they work with, what areas they may work in, better understand your own expertise, the institution, and building upon that company profiling, understanding which aspects of that may be of interest or particular use to a company. Show you how you can benchmark some of this activity, and also lastly, an overview of some of the information you can view in researcher profiles. So before I jump across to the demo, I'm just going to say you are going to see real data for a couple of real institutions here. You'll see their names at the top of the page, but I want to highlight that it doesn't really matter who I've picked. There's no like kind of endorsements or affiliation here. They're just interesting examples of particular institutions, but yeah, the point here is to try and imagine your own data here. Unfortunately, we have too many people on the call for me to be able to do that reliably in the meeting. But the point here is to demonstrate what the data looks like, not to focus on the particular numbers for a particular institution. But if anyone happens to be on fr from any of the institutions I do show, then hopefully that'll be of particular interest to you. So I'm going to jump out my slides now and jump into the app. So as touched on, I'm going to start on showing you the citations. But just a brief layout of the architecture of the application here. So on the left, we have our navigation, and you can see that at the moment I'm in a potential collaborators page. But you can also see some highlighted sections here. If there's an arrow, like the one I'm hovering over, this will expand to show you sub-pages where you'll be able to click through into more detail to understand particular things about the entity, either the organization, the research, or the company you're looking at. I'll also highlight that at the top you have this type ahead where you can input an organization. And then below that, we'll also on several pages have filtering. So you can set a year range for activity. This is pre-filtered to show you the past 5 full years plus the current year, but you can set whatever range you so desire. And on this particular page, you can also narrow down to collaborations for a particular country. So you would only look at companies based in a particular country. Different pages will have different filters depending on the particular use case the page aims to answer. But we can touch on some of those as we move through the app. So if I make my way down, I'll start to touch on some of the information you see within the app. So here we have a table that is highlighting the organizations that most frequently cite, or the companies, I should say, that most frequently cite your institution's research. So I say your in bunny quotes because the basic use case is that people will look up their own institution. But as I mentioned before, you can look up any institution within this app. And you can see here it's rank ordered by citations. But if you were interested in another metric, for example, our academic proximity metric, which shows the percentage of the company's research that involves an academic organization, then you can click that and the table will refilter to focus on the metric, or resort, I should say, to focus on the metric you're most interested in. You'll also see here that you're getting an explanation of what the metric is. So if you're unclear, you can always hover over there to better understand that metric. You'll also see on this table, we give you a collaboration strength metric. So collaboration strength is the number of co-authored publications we can find between the organization we're profiling and then the company listed in the row. So you can see here for all these ones at the top, they have already collaborated with this institution. So this may give a highlight of someone who you haven't done much with, but actually cites your research a lot, that there's more to be done there. But what may be of particular interest, and the use case we're kind of looking at in particular on this page, is the potential collaborators. So here is the same table effectively, but with one crucial difference. We have stripped out any companies where we can find pre-existing co-authorship. So now these are just companies where we are showing you where they have cited an institution's work but have not co-authored. So these are would be new partners in that sense. If you know they're interested in your university's research, but we do not know to what, but they have no pre-existing co-authored publications. Most of the data points in this app are click-throughable. So I could click through here to view all the underlying publications if I wanted to see at that level of detail. But also, as I'll touch on later, and as I've mentioned previously, you can profile companies so you can see what areas they work in and then understand where that overlaps with you as well at a higher level, more aggregated level, rather than having to pick through individual publications. One thing we also do is show you the most recent date of citation. So this will be based on the date of publication of the most recent output the company has produced that cites your institution's research. So this really helps with striking while the iron is hot. So you know a company, not only have they cited you a lot, but if they have done so recently. Um, and in fact, in some cases, the more astute of you may note here, we have dates in the future. This will likely be because a publication has been made available online and we're picking up the print date. But you can see here, there's plenty of recent or up-to-date activity here to act upon. So we're not just showing you the sum of activity, we're also showing you how recent it is, how timely any intervention you may make based on this data would be. If I continue my way down, you can also see here, we don't just rely on publications, we can also show you any patents that a company has made that cites one of your organization's patents. We can show you which patent the company is citing from and which patent they are citing to, and then also give you an overview of what the primary field of research that patent is within. And again, as with many individual data points on this app, you'll see here we have click-through options to view the underlying patent in the core dimensions database if you do want to understand in more detail what this is all about, what the interest of the company is, and how you can follow up on that more, which would also reveal who the underlying researchers are named on the patent, either the cited patent or the citing patent. So you can see the specific individuals who are most of interest for any relationship you hope to build upon that if there isn't one already. And then lastly, we also give you a feed of the most recent citations and who those citing organizations are. So you can see, get a feed of the most up-to-date activity at an individual article level. So hopefully that helps show you how you can find companies that are interested in your work but have not necessarily worked with you. But I also know from my reporting days that it can be quite difficult to get a full view of activity that is already happening or has already happened with the institution. Again, even if you have good data on which companies you're collaborating with on grants or contract research, it may be more difficult to get a sense of where you're working on co-authored publications or patents. And that's what the corporate collaborations page of the app speaks to. This has been open for a while, so it may need a quick refresh. So you can see I've stayed within the Explore All Corporate Collaborations portion of the app, but I've now moved up to the Corporate Collaborations page, which touches on existing collaborations. So here you can start to get an overview of the institution, and this is quite useful if you need to report up to senior management or an external body about absolute numbers of activity, but also the ability to drill through to understand what the underlying data behind these numbers is. So we can give you a count of total collaborations in the time period you're looking at. So this would be co-authored publications in this case, but also how many corporate partners are involved in that. And then the institution you're profiling's corporate proximity. So we talked about academic proximity before, what share of a company's publications involve academia. We can show you here what share of an institution's publications involve the private sector. We can give you a breakdown of that over time, both by total volume, but also split out with the academic or the corporate activity. And then below that, kind of like we saw on the previous page, a feed of the most recent collaborations in terms of publications. And then you can also get a sense here of whether this is a new collaboration or one that already has lots of activity behind it, as you can see from the differing numbers and collaboration strength here. Beyond this page, we can start to get, or sorry, beyond that table, we can start to see information about who the individuals involved in these kind of collaborations are. So here we have an overview of an institution and then showing you which of their academics most frequently collaborate with industry and what their own corporate proximity is. So here we have researchers where kind of 2/3 to 3/4 of their publications involve corporates, and some of these people have pretty meaty publication histories as well. So across hundreds of collaborators. Um, but as we scroll down, you can also start to see people who have fewer collaborations, but which may be more intense or well developed in their nature. And you can kind of use the combination of the proximity and the count to get a sense of that. And there are also other parts of the app where you can, again, look up an individual researcher and see who they most frequently collaborate with, if you want to understand that at the level of an individual, say. And then lastly, we have a profile of the companies an institution works with most frequently. So rank ordered by the collaboration strength metric, again, as a reminder, the total number of publications. But again, we give you a feed of the most recent collaboration that company has had, and specific details about what that collaboration was, and also show you who at your organization most frequently works with that company, if we can pull out that detail, and additionally, what area of research that's in, and when the most recent collaboration was published. So you get a wide-ranging view of the activity at the company level there as well. So going back to our initial use case, or even just building on this page, you may have a company that you're interested in and want to find out more about. Perhaps they cite your work a lot, and you want to understand what they are citing, or maybe not even what they're citing, but who they already work with, what areas they already work in. Or maybe you're new to your institution, you've looked at the existing collaborations page, and you want to understand more about the companies you most frequently work with, see who the people involved are, etc. If I move across, I can then start to profile a company and understand more about their activity. So here I picked on Google. Again, don't read too much into why I've picked a particular company. They're just one that there's a lot of collaboration with academia. So this might start to look familiar initially. We have the same view of the company as you get for the institution view. So you can get a sense of how often they have collaborated with academia, which is potentially useful information because it gives you a sense of their maturity in working with academia. If a company doesn't often frequently work with the higher education sector, they might be more, it might be an indicator they'd be more resistant or need more hand-holding or bringing along to engage in a relationship. Um, Alternatively, you might look at this and think that Google are already saturated with partners and your time is better invested elsewhere. These are just thoughts and ideas. Depends on your institution's setup, what your priorities are, but those are potential ways this kind of information could be useful to you. Again, you can see how that is varied over time. Then you can also start to see things that are slightly different to the institutional profile. So you can see the 10 institutions this company most frequently works with. And this could be useful because maybe there's a university here you know that already works in the exact same space you do, and that might be another indication that your route in is blocked. But additionally, maybe you don't have a relationship with this company already, but you can see a collaborator here that you do have a good relationship with, and they may be a good in to working with the company. That's kind of information that you can drag out from Dimension Industry Partnerships. You can also see here where a company has been awarded funding or been listed as a partner on funding from a traditional research funder. And you can see here Google has got a lot of money from UKRI, which might be particular interest to attendees of this call, given it's a KUK webinar. But again, you'd be able to click through here and see what the individual grants are, in addition to being able to see an overview of the level of funding achieved. You can start to see here, again, we kind of get the inverse view of what we were looking at for the institutional profile, the individual researchers who most frequently work with academia, and then which discipline areas they work with. And again, the discipline levels here we're looking at are actually quite a low level or lowish level. So not just broad biological sciences or physics, but condensed matter physics, particle and high energy physics, etc. So you can get a more specific understanding of what areas they work within, and then you are there better able to match that to individual researchers or research groups at your institution. Again, you get a feed of the most recent collaborations, so you can understand what the company is working on, right now, and who they are doing it with. And again, whether that's with a new partner or one they have a strong pre-existing relationship, and how many people at the company are involved in that particular collaboration. And then also we give you a feed of their most recent patent filings. You can see here we don't just show granted or awarded patents, we can also show applied for patents and which jurisdiction they're in. So you can understand technologies the company is trying to commercialize right now, and this hopefully that gives you it adds to this sense of timeliness we're trying to build for the app, so that you can intervene with the most relevant research in the most timely manner. And then as we continue to scroll down, you can see here, you can get an overview of which areas the company publishes in, both with that kind of intermediate level of focus. And unsurprisingly, you can see that Google is heavily focused on machine learning, data science, human-centered computing. But if I want to understand that at an even lower level, I can look at topics or concepts, as we call them internally at digital science. So these are really low-level, granular research areas that we've pulled out based on keywords within the document. Excuse me. So that, depending on the level you're working at, you can either pick the slightly higher level or this really focused level to pick up on areas the company is interested in, and then you can understand, do they match up with your strengths? And is that an area that you have a particular niche or expertise in, more so maybe than other academic partners, or that you're part of a consortium that has strength in those areas that you can build upon. So kind of touching on that point about topics and areas of strength, that's a good segue into looking at research topics. So you can now see I've jumped across to a different part of the app where we're exploring research topics. And here we are looking at the most common topics across the various different document types I introduced that Dimensions has at the beginning of the call, and understand which areas a particular institution most frequently publishes in or receives grant funding in, or files for patents within. Again, if you're interested in one of these over another, particularly with a commercialization hat on, you may want to focus on patents. Then you can sort these tables as desired. And again, it's possible from here to drill down into more detail. If I continue to make my way down. Oh, apologies. I've got a very warped visualization here because I'm zoomed in. But you can also see here a distribution of activity over time. Actually, I'll scroll up because that's getting a bit small. And by field of research at a higher level. But say now, I've identified a topic I particularly want to look at in more detail. I'll try and pick a more focused one. Let's go with malaria, say. So here, I can then click on malaria as a topic, and then click on the Explore Research Topic link that pops up. And then I can start to explore that topic in more detail for the institution I have selected. So once the page loads, you'll start to see more information about maybe the individuals at the institution. I'm going to gloss over that for a minute and start talking about corporate collaborations instead. I can start to see here. So just if I give the data a second to load, I can start to look at existing corporate collaborations in the area of malaria. I can see here this shows in a slightly different way to what we saw before, where you can view the data as a network diagram. And we also have a nice number of collaborators here for this to be legible. And I'll also note that this visualization is customizable. So there's a control pane I can expand on the left here. So the default coloring is by cluster, which isn't particularly useful for this particular example of the visualization because there's not a lot of connection between companies here. They all work with London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, but don't collaborate with each other on the same publications. So maybe I want to understand where the most recent publications are happening here. I can switch to the color coding to be by last publication year, and then the warmer colors represent more recent activity, the cooler colors, older activity. So you can get a sense, again, of that timeliness theme that we've talked about throughout the app. You can also start to understand which companies the institution already most frequently works with in this area, how often they have co-authored in this topic, but also the total number of co-authored publications. So you can see if you're also working with the company or a collaborator or competitor is working with a company across lots of different areas. And then we can also show you how recent this activity is. You can see here there's a bit more of a range than we've seen in other parts of the app, where some of this activity is from quite a long time ago. So it helps give you, again, a sense of that timeliness. And then you can also start to see, perhaps particularly useful, are researcher to researcher pairs, and how many collaborating publications there are in these areas. I'll kind of gloss over that because I don't want to focus on individuals, but to make you aware that that functionality is available within the app. If I go back up, there's also a corporate collaboration opportunities view in the app. Sorry, I'll just refresh that, having some gremlins. And I'll also just highlight here while we're on this page, you can also filter to particular years and collaboration countries here too, if you want to narrow in, say, on the United Kingdom or whichever country the institution you're based at works in, or if you have a target country for internationalization or expanding your activity more widely, you can focus in there and understand at that level as well. But you'll notice now we can see an overview of the companies that are most active in a particular topic, regardless of whether they work with the institution you selected. So we show you both here the number of publications they have in that topic, but also the collaboration strength overall with the institution. So you've got examples here where there's a lot of publications in this topic, but not much collaboration with the company. So that may be a new avenue to explore. You can also see here that a company maybe doesn't have that many publications in a topic, but work with you a lot already. So maybe that's something you can build on an existing relationship, or maybe it helps identify it's an avenue not worth exploring. Again, with further drilling down of the data or looking at different points, maybe the particular experts you have or your institution strategy, it helps you focus in on those areas. But you can start to see here, hopefully, how these things give you a sense of where there might be opportunities to explore a particular research area with a company, or how well your institution's expertise in areas of strength match up with what a company is interested in or working on. And we give you the detail there to build upon not just topics, but existing relationships at the individual level to better understand, build upon, or create new opportunities. Lastly, within the app, I want to quickly touch upon benchmarking. So you can see here the filters are slightly different for this page. We now have a comparison organization section, and it kind of doesn't matter that I've picked Manchester as the lead organization here. What I'm really intending this to do is show that you can benchmark mission groups, just as an example. So I picked the N8, which, for people not aware, is a UK-based mission group of universities in the north of England. But you can show here how activity compares across all those institutions. So total volume of activity across a given year range, the corporate proximity metric, so which of these institutions most frequently work with companies as a share of their overall research output, but also that figure as a total overall volume, how many citations they receive from the private sector, and then also the ability to share or understand at a very high level academic focus based on proportion of publications in broad discipline areas. So this can help give you a sense of how comparable an institution may be for this kind of benchmarking activity. Institutions that focus more on the arts and humanities might naturally have less corporate activity. So maybe they're not good for a comparison of what, say, might be achievable for planning purposes compared to one that's more focused on engineering or physical sciences. But just to make you aware that this part of the app is available for that kind of context. Lastly, just to touch on some of the pages that are available about individual researchers. I have anonymized these because I don't want to, kind of pick on an individual person, less of an overview with a institution or a company. But you can see here the kind of things you can look up about an individual researcher. So you can see their own corporate proximity, how frequently they as an individual have collaborated with the private sector, how many organizations they've done that across. And also, perhaps an additional thing here that may be of use, their corporate affiliations, which I'll touch on a bit more in a slide we'll come on to in a second. So we can show you here which specific companies they've most frequently collaborated with, who the total number of collaborators are, what the most frequent collaboration or the most recent collaboration with given company is, and then how recent that was by year. An additional thing we can show you is the corporate affiliations. So this is building up on the affiliation data I mentioned from before, where we can tell where an author is based upon the affiliation they're claiming in a submitted publication. We keep a history of that in Dimensions and use it to build researcher profiles. So you can see here it's showing the individual's current affiliation at the top, Johns Hopkins University in this case in the States. But then below that, if there are any affiliations we can find that they've stated with a particular company, then we show those and we show it over time. So this may be another route in to working with a particular company. Maybe you don't have relationships existing on a co-authorship basis, but you do have someone who used to work with or was seconded to a particular company. And you can see here, this individual has quite a varied history of working across or directly with the private sector in some way. And you can also see how recent that activity is. So again, get a good sense of the timeliness of the intervention. But even if it's not timely, you can understand if the person has maintained any of those relationships, whether those individuals are still at the company or maybe they've moved on elsewhere. It gives you a researcher who you can ask about or you can ask that information of and build upon. So I think that brings me to the end of my slides. So I think that gives us a bit of time for questions. I think we still have 10 minutes or so left. If there have been any, I'm happy to answer those, or if people have any more they want to raise, then I'm happy to touch on those now as well.
Thank you very much, Shane, for that. I think almost everyone will find that absolutely insightful. Really, really great to see the app in motion as well, rather than just seeing it on PowerPoint slides. It's great to see it actually being worked and talked through by an expert. So thank you very much for that, Shane. If anyone has any questions, if you would like to pop them in the Q&A section for us, and we'll be happy to. Well, I say Shane will be happy to answer them. I will not be answering any of them.
Yeah, I
No,
mean, if
nothing.
people don't have any questions, then it might be useful as we have a bit of time if people give thoughts on if there was a part of the app they were most interested in or thought seemed most useful. It might be interesting to see that if people are happy to share that information. If you don't have any questions. Um,
Yeah, again, if anyone
but
wants to put those in the Q&A or in the chat, feel free. And yeah, feel free to share your thoughts on it. No, it looks like we've got a bit of quietness today, but yeah,
that's absolutely fine.
if anyone does have any further questions, how can they reach you, Shane?
So, I mean, I'm actually happy to directly receive questions given the small audience. So I'll put my email address in the chat as a starting point. I will also, I should have done this beforehand. I will dig out a page where you can find out more about the app. And from there, if this has been of interest to you, book a demo, or contact us for more formal information as well. I'm just bringing up our marketing page, and then I'll drop that in the chat um, as well, so that people have that information to hand.
Amazing. So hopefully all of you who are on the call will be able to see in the chat that Shane just put his email address and then put that link there. So make sure to save those before you leave the call, as it's sometimes a little bit hard to trace it back with Zoom. But otherwise, thank you very much, Shane, for an insightful webinar. And thank you to all the attendees for coming. And we hope to see you again on another Knowledge Exchange UK webinar. Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay, thanks all.